Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the 20 Percenters, where we focus on what matters: health, wealth, relationships, and time. Brought to you by the New Year Network, the immersion experience for leaders looking to move the needle in 2020.
That's good. Good tagline.
Solid.
Yeah.
Right? I had the pleasure of sitting down with my good friend Jessica Depatie now.
Depatie.
Fuck,
I know.
I got it right with Jeff. Sorry.
Look, here's the awkward thing.
All right, here we go.
Before we started, so Coach Durr's here and Jeff, my husband who's sitting over there, they just recorded a podcast before we started. He's like, how do I say your last name? Because we have a bit of a French last name. It's extremely French, not bit French.
I was about to say, is it kind of French?
And Jeff turns to me and he goes, how do we say our last name again? I'm like, do you know what kind of wife you make me look like? Say your last name like this. No, but what we're doing is I'm bringing back power to his roots, right? Mm-hmm. Like he's French Canadian, and I just want to keep that in our family, you know, even though I'm not French nor Canadian, but I want our kids to have a bit of that.
Know where they come from.
So
that's important.
I want our last name to hold that essence. So we're saying it like his mom does.
That's what's up. Okay. All right. You come from, we met way back in the days of Barbell Shrug, Barbell Business. You were doing a ton of marketing. You're still doing a ton of marketing. And you're now in co-working, and you're doing all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
But what I want to dive into, and I find extremely interesting, is your mission to market to men.
More or less, yes.
Yes. Let's explore that.
Yeah, sure. So when you and I met, I was deep into fitness marketing, which is still the bulk of what I do now. And when I realized, as I tore that apart, because I realized, I'm less of a fitness fan because, I work out here and there, but I'm not like a huge fitness person like yourself and many of the other people on your team. I'm more of a groupie. Okay. I like what it does to you mentally more than even physically sometimes. So in looking, so why do I like marketing in the fitness space? What is it about this space that calls me to it? It's that I get to dive into the psyche of people that are constantly trying to improve themselves. Sure. They're searching for greatness. They're achieving it every day in their own way, even if it's just, an hour at a CrossFit gym. Yep. So as I've done this for about 10 years now, and I think around the 8-year mark, that's when you start to look back at your skills and your talents and de-identify with them because they just kind of become part of you. I was looking for another way to reframe what I did so I could stay excited about it. And in meeting Jeff and working with the process or the Special Forces experience, which I'm assuming this episode might come out after, so people may know what that is. Yeah. But if not, it's an immersive growth experience for men that's held once a year in the Northern Canadian wilderness. There's an extensive application process where we will interview hundreds of men throughout the year and only select 30 that are mentally, physically, and spiritually and emotionally capable of surviving something like this. And then they are just basically thrown into the lion's den and then psychologically analyzed on how they perform throughout. Okay. So after doing the first serial or the first event, I couldn't unexperience that. Yeah. And what I realized was in just fine-tuning what I love about marketing in the fitness space has to do with men in particular, which was really interesting because as a non-man, right? Like
a non-man.
Yes. Somebody who identifies as a non-man.
As a woman.
Woman, yeah, that's another way to put it if you like. So, I just became really enthralled with this other side of humanity. Yeah. That I've actually realized, I've always been really interested in what makes men tick. Because when you are talking to a man that's really in tune with himself, who knows his purpose and knows his life work, it's like one of the most magical experiences that you can have as a person. And so I find in the fitness space, working with leaders in the fitness space like yourself, these men are on this completely different level of servitude. And then they also work in this suffering, this physical pain aspect to it that is very, has a lot of masculine energy around it. Lots of women, myself included, I love CrossFit. We're attracted to that kind of leadership style, right? So I guess what I'm getting at is marketing for men. What I'm looking to do is sync up with certain leaders in multiple different communities and help them be the best versions of themselves possible. And with my skill set, it's to be this magician type. So I don't know if do you have much experience in archetypes?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're familiar with king, magician, lover, and what's the other one I'm missing? Warrior. Okay. So in order for me to ethically do my job as a marketer,
Yes.
I need to match up with a good king, because I'm the magician in this equation.
Sure.
The king archetype here, or the CEO, or this leader, whoever needs marketing help, they have this vision, they have their community, they have like their kingdom that they're looking to rule, right? Or to create or elevate and make bigger and more prosperous for everybody that they're serving. If that king is underdeveloped, doesn't have an amazing vision, doesn't know who he is, and I'll explain why he in a moment, doesn't offer something to his community that's really truly good for them, if he doesn't have like high values, so like a well-developed king, then I can't do my job. So just out of doing what I do every day and being able to sleep every night, because you know how marketers are often seen, you know, as like manipulators, like it's very true. The magician archetype has a very like bipolar kind of attitude. You can either use your magic, which is, you know, I take your vision and I can now enhance it and make it bigger and give it to people. It can be used for good or evil, right? Essentially, more or less on that spectrum. So the reason why I wanted to focus in on men is because at this moment in time, men, your age, in our country, in Canada, they are our leaders, right?
Yep.
And women are on their way up. You know, there's a lot of other issues that are happening right now in our community that, or in our country, that make supporting men like yourself, you know, successful men, like, why do they need support, right? Well, we're in reality, they're just people, right?
Sure.
We all have our own pain. We all have our own issues. So focusing on helping those men be their best selves, making sure that their vision is as amazing as possible, making sure that their product does what it says that it's going to do and will actually offer benefit to their kingdom, I feel like is my responsibility.
Okay. So you had made mention of helping men who society perceives to have it all.
A weird group to want to help, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, you know, one of the things that we'll talk about at the New Year Network is the perceptual burden of leaders on leaders, right? The expectation that we have it all figured out. We are to walk around society as holier than thou, and the expectations that come from that, and how far a fall it is when you're discovered as imperfect, right? Is that congruent with your necessity to help this group of people?
Absolutely. That word perception is exactly the word that I was thinking of while you were talking. Like, you say it. Because what a scary thing to have the leader and the person that you look up to, to have him be in this mode of almost kind of fear. Like, if I mess this up, that's it, you know? So this need to feel perfect and be perfect and to drive a specific type of car, or to never show your vulnerability, or never put your stuff out there, or to never show any emotion, right? That's the other thing. It doesn't matter how successful you are. You have emotions, you have feelings, you're just human, right? And so I do feel like it's something that I'm being called to help these men understand that they are just like everybody else. They can get as much support as people who our society deems needs more support than they do, because I feel like there's an alarming number of cases of suicide and depression in this demographic that we say has it all figured out. You know, how can we turn a blind eye to these men who just because they are like potentially wealthy and are intellectual and you know, ... all the other things that come with this perception of somebody who has it all. How can we say, well, they should be able to figure it out because X, Y, Z?
What raised your awareness of how little support these men who are perceived to have it all don't have? What was the catalyst? How'd you figure that out?
It's probably less interesting than you might expect. It was me going to an airport once. And do you have these moments where you just go somewhere and you have a moment of like heightened awareness where everything just kind of looks different and you're like, I'm just alone here and I can see all this as a scene happening around me. There's something important that I need to pay attention to. So I just had one of those weird moments.
Yeah.
I call it my itchy feeling. I don't know. I don't get itchy, but it's just one of these like, oh God, clutch myself.
Right. Nobody can see me, but I can see everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One
You
of those
become
weird
invisible in the room.
Super. I'm getting goosebumps. That's so weird.
Yeah.
I love when that happens, but it also gets me kind of funny feeling. So yeah, I was at the airport and I see, I just kind of like scanned, and you know those weird moments where you see that everybody's on their phone, it makes you kind of sad, right?
Yeah.
Well, in this moment, I, for some reason, like lit up were just these middle-aged men that were hunched over, small, looking at their phone while their families were talking among themselves, you know, and I just felt like, that's so sad. Like, what's going on here, you know?
Yeah.
All these people are going on a vacation that most people could probably never afford. So who cares about that guy, right? He's living a life that many people in the world would die to live. So who cares if he's sad? But I just saw this sadness in so many of these men who, I don't know, it just kind of spoke to me. And I was like, I need to pay attention to this. Okay. And that happened quite a while ago, and it didn't really, you know, as life goes, it's not just one thing that happens, but all these little things that started happening to me. Like every time I would go into a Borders before like audiobooks were really a thing, you know, you go to a bookstore, I would be called to the self-development area because I just felt like something's missing in my life. And I was called to the men's section for some reason, you know? I just kind of wanted to understand, like, what's my partner about? What was my dad about? Because I kind of felt like I knew myself, but I didn't really know other people around me. So I thought, okay, I'm going to start with the opposite of me, which is a man. Yeah. And so, I just kind of developed this interest in the other.
I mean, you're versed in archetypes. I also know that you understand energy, you know, through some of our previous conversation at the Barbell Mastermind and whatnot. What is it about these high-powered men, right, perceivably? What is it about their energy that breeds that lack of support? Because there's that introspection, but also that projection that is, you know, creates that barrier. Like they either appear to not want or need the help, but at the same time, that's also the message that they may be giving off.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the thing that comes to mind is an underdeveloped warrior side. Okay. That's something that comes to mind. Sure. These men are used to being like strong. They're used to having a presence, or at least faking one. They're used to having fun when they're younger. You know, this is like the Western man, the cowboy, right? I guess you can think of like him like that. Okay. When it comes to actually fighting for something, I think that's where something is lost and lacking in our modern man. I think back to like the things that young boys used to do to become men in the past, right? Like joining the military.
The rites of passage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Joining the military is a great one. It's a classic one. And then some of these tribes where going to war was less common, you know, they would have these incredibly dangerous feats that they would go through.
These crucibles.
And I think for the Western man, your rite of passage was going to the military, like, you know, not very long in our past. You know, that was the thing that you did. Right. And then now in this modern era, men have less what they would consider a purpose. What they're here to do is really fuzzy because their wives are self-sufficient. They're totally equal in so many of the ways that traditionally men and women have not been, right? Like we are our own providers. We can get ourselves pregnant in whatever way possible by going to the store or getting it online. I don't know. I haven't looked it up. I don't actually know how that goes, but just go down the street, do something. And then we can protect ourselves, right? So what is the purpose of a man now? And I think it's like that feeling of I need to fight for something, I need to be something, you know, that kind of like angst that would send a man to war, I think is missing right now. And I think that's showing up as depression. Something that you guys were talking about earlier was PTSD or like depression in veterans. One of the stats that I had found was that the depression rate is higher among non-deployed veterans. So why is that?
Well, answering it most directly, in the time that I served, the expectation was you were going to deploy. So in my generation of service, right, it's like you signed up to do the deal, but you never got to go.
Yeah.
Right. And there's an element of FOMO, right? If you're missing out, you don't have those stories to tell, you know, you're on the team, but you never played.
Oh, you're sitting on the bench. That sucks.
I mean,
Yeah.
in the most relatable way to put that, you know, I've got buddies that didn't deploy, right? And, you know, I wouldn't say they're depressed by any means, but at the same time, when there's us in the room, they definitely feel less than.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. They didn't get to go on their hero's journey, and I think that's what a lot of men are missing. And I think that's why I'm just going to go out on a limb here and assume that this is why you like to help people who are on their journey of entrepreneurship. It's because you're not just facilitating a way for them to make more money and to be autonomous. You are facilitating their human experience and helping them complete that cycle. Because I feel like if men in particular don't complete that cycle, because it looks different for men and women, right?
Sure.
If they don't complete that cycle of training for something and trying something and failing at it and trying again and getting wise counsel and like going through the whole process, we know how that all goes. I feel like there's a lack of human experience just in his psyche. And then all of a sudden, you know, he's 55 staring at his phone being like, what have I done this whole time?
Yeah.
And I think that also conceptualizing it as the hero's journey and even like blocking out and writing down in your journal these certain moments of your life where I think we go through many hero's journeys, right? Like,
oh, absolutely.
You had one, I'm sure, when you were growing up where it was like teenage years, you're like, woo, like many of those, right?
Right.
Military was probably one, having children, meeting your wife.
Yep.
It's all a series of trials and tribulations, meeting foes and friends and learning more about yourself every time you got back to the top of that cycle.
Yes. Yeah.
And we live in a admittedly like artificial world now where we can become quite successful fairly easily.
Right.
Almost to our detriment, because then you were even saying earlier, like when you were working the recruiting offices, these guys would come in, you're like, right, you're super smart, but you've had no life experience.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for knowing yourself to a point where, to a certain extent, to a certain level of adversity, like, you know how you're going to respond, right? And what I would experience in the recruiting offices, I was interviewing candidates for ROTC scholarships and stuff like that. These kids come in completely dedicated. It's the opposite of extreme. It's the opposite extreme of sports specialization, right? Where you're so committed to being the quarterback, you're now missing some very critical skills in the game of football, right? Where these kids are so far to the other end of the spectrum academically, right? They took nothing but AP classes. They literally got a perfect score on the SAT, you know, like they did all those things. They were in every club, right? That was their extracurricular. But like in their universe, none of that is hard. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, there's the pressure of acing a test, but there's really no negative ramification to the result, right? Yeah. Whereas losing a game, coming up short on the expected donation in a fundraiser, whatever, it's really soft padding if you fall, right? Yeah. So I would sit in these interviews and I'd be like, you know, one of the questions I'd ask these kids is, explain to me a certain experience you've had where you had to overcome adversity that, based on what I see on the resume, didn't have to do with what's already on there. And by and large, they had such a hard time answering that question without having to, like, make shit up. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, use a lot of excessive adjectives to make it sound tougher than it really was. Right? Excessive adjectives. You know? Those are the worst. You know, they wordsmith the shit out of their story. Whereas, you know, I get the the captain of the football team, above average grades, has a job because his parents don't make enough money. So he's self-supporting in the sense that like the clothes he's wearing are the clothes that he bought, right? He just so happens to be an Eagle Scout. Like this kid can juggle some shit. You know what I mean? Like he can overcome adversity and maybe not excel, but at least succeed, right? So I know from having served that kid is more equipped to succeed in a life or death situation than the one trick pony that is either the jock with horrible grades and no extracurriculars, or the kid who's committed to academia and has no social acumen.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we're failing in society is to kind of drive your point home is we are over specialized is the problem. We have pigeonholed ourselves so that we are no longer effective across a broad spectrum of circumstance. If it's not this, I'm terrible.
Yeah.
And that's not the real world.
It's not the real world. And any methodology that fuels denial or delusion is the enemy of awakening. And I think that that's a thing that happens when you put yourself in adverse situations or you experience them or like, you don't put yourself through them, but they happen for you, I guess you could say.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like you want the kid that's gone through some shit to be on your team.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing. It's not cool to say you're going through the shit when you're going through it. It's like we all have to wait until it's done. You're like, I got through it.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting and very honest point. So, like, how far do you have to be? Like, how close to the finish line do you have to be while you're going through the shit before you kind of, like, pull the veil back and be like, guess what, guys?
Ta-da!
I've been smiling, but it's been real shitty, Like,
oh, my God, yeah. It's like, is it too soon? Right. Absolutely.
If I got to completely ruin my reputation right here, right now, like,
and that's how I feel about, like how Jeff and I met. We were talking about the story earlier. I was engaged and supposed to be married in 2 weeks in Hawaii, and then I meet Jeff, and it's not the cleanest way to meet somebody, but like that was almost 4 years ago, and still I feel embarrassed to say that like this is how our love story started, right? Because it's kind of like mucky, and I wondered to myself how many years does it have to be before I'm proud to tell that story? What sucks because when you're going through the shit, when you're low vibing, you're probably hurting other people too, right? So how are you telling that story and being proud of it? How can you do that really, I guess, when it's too soon, when you know that the hurt and the stuff that you've put other people through potentially is so close, So I think that could be another thing.
And I think the answer to that when you're talking about the involvement of others is you can be proud of that story under the assumption that there's closure. You know what I'm saying? If it's open-ended, there's things left unspoken. It's kind of like, can I say that? Like, is that how I'm supposed to tell the story? But if it's cut and dry, we're good or we're not good, whatever. You know what I mean? Then you can tell the story as it needs to be told.
Yeah.
As it pertains to the involvement of others. I mean, I was completely shit-faced when I met my wife.
And she loved it, I'm sure, right?
She was like, who is this fucking guy? And I told her, I was like I knew. See, this is the tale of Nicole and I. I had the benefit of seeing her entire family tree, right? And where you fell in love with Jeff and everything that is Jeff, right? I got to see everything, like Nicole's ethos, right? Her parents are happily married. Like the family is tight.
That's great.
All the cousins know each other. Like, so I know that even if it's at a subconscious level, right, what her expectations of family are, right? And I'm completely on board with that shit. And she just so happens to be hot. She's educated. She's all the things, like, as an individual, but, like, all the extra shit. They say, like, when you marry somebody, you marry their family.
Yes.
I was like, I could do that.
So in your shit-faced state, I'm sure you conveyed all of that so well.
Terribly. Horribly. And I was like, you know what? I think I fit in this thing. The funny thing is her Aunt Patty is my biggest fan. She's like, I don't know what took you so long. You know?
That's so great. It's always good to have a coach on the other side, right?
You know what I'm saying? I'm glad I had an advocate because my boy Steve was like, hey, you remember my crazy fucking friend? He kind of likes you, you know?
Steve, God damn it.
Yeah. And Steve's wife, Molly, so they've been together since I've known Steve, right? I was wild and single Michael way back when. And so I was the dude. Molly was like, don't hang out with that guy. He's nothing.
You were
but
that
trouble.
guy?
I was that guy.
I can see that.
So, you know, it was a little up a hill climb, but, you know, we got to the summit. We made it. And, but, you know, like nobody knew that I was pursuing Nicole. And, you know, I would venture to guess that if it hadn't worked out, it wouldn't be a story worth telling. Mm-hmm. At least in my mind's eye, as my ego would tell the story. You know, we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
She was just some girl that I chased for a little bit and it didn't work out. Whatever. Moving on. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So, I mean, it's really, the answer to that question is so contextualized. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And like seeing you two together, it's beautiful. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
You match, you vibe. You know what I mean? You're so different and so much the same. Mm-hmm. You know? So like I think, as I know you and knowing you back then and seeing you now, that you should be able to tell that story proudly because it is your story. There's no, it's not right, it's not wrong. It is, right? So now you have a choice to make. You can tell it in the aftermath of sadness, or you can tell it in the aftermath of something amazing. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, look at
like,
this.
That's a choice.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. I love it. I love getting therapized on podcasts, national television.
I've done a lot of fucking work on myself. I feel qualified to give this advice.
I'm taking it. I'm soaking it up. I am a sponge right now. What else you got for me?
But you know, like I think, you know, people just get lost in placing significance on stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, like I mean, just think about the moral qualm that you're putting yourself through in the telling of your story. Like there's a lot of fear of what everybody else will think. Who gives a shit? He's great. You're awesome. You guys are great together. It worked out for the best. Whatever.
I know.
You know what I'm saying?
I know.
And, you know, like, when I started working with Alex, who's going to be speaking at the New Year Network, he's my NLP coach right now. We did our first session of mental and emotional release therapy. And one of the things that I found at a subconscious level was holding me back was the guilt I felt for not being able to take everybody with me on this journey.
Oh my gosh,
so,
Michael, that is so real right now.
Right? It's crazy. So you go through these periods of life, like you're building a business, you're building a relationship, you're building, right? And there, along the way, there are people that help you build that thing, who you are, your character, whatever. But at some point, they fall off the journey. They go on their own path. You go this way, whatever. They're no longer with you on your path, right? And for a long time, that used to bother the shit out of me. Like I owe them something, but they're no longer in the picture for me to pay that back, whatever. So it's just like,
try to fit them in and just not
exactly.
really a good fit.
And then at the same time, to our detriment, you know, you try to once you're aware of that thing, you try to keep them on the path for longer than they should be, right? And you end up in an even shittier place than you would have been if they had just left, right? So you have to acknowledge the fact that people are with you for as long as they need to be with you, and it's reciprocal. You are with them for as long as you need to be with them for either of you to experience the growth required to move to the next level. And in some cases, they get to be with you for longer than others. But you cannot feel guilty about that journey ending.
Oh, that's great. It reminds me of a segment of the hero's journey called the Friends and Foes area, where you're figuring out who your friends are and who your foes are. And it didn't occur to me until you were just saying this, that sometimes you try to fit people in, keep them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beyond what's healthy for both of you,
Right.
but just out of loyalty and perceived integrity, right? Because you said, I'm sure when you met this person, you loved them and they were perfect for the thing and all that.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I'm committed to helping this person be
Right.
the best version of themselves. But
Sure.
then, like, maybe, I know my ego gets in the way sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, well, what would they think of me if I can't
Right.
anymore, you
Yeah.
know, or like I need somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep that person too close to you
Yeah.
and you don't let them go, even if they don't want to go,
Sure.
they become a foe,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
That
Mhm.
friend that was with you for so long, then weird stuff happens.
Right.
And then they are recategorized.
Yeah.
And
I'll give you a perfect example. So, we had long since left active duty. This is like 2013, 2014. A buddy of mine, he was living in Atlanta, and he was just hoping beyond hope that this toxic relationship would work out. And every couple of months, and granted, this guy had a very successful military career. He went on to get his MBA. I mean, like you said, he's one of those guys you look at and he's got his shit together. He's driving the Cadillac. He was doing the whole thing, right? And every couple of months, he's like, dog, she did it again. Bro, the only reason I'm in fucking Atlanta is because of her and blah, 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 blah. And eventually, I had to draw a line in the sand. I was like, look, bro, I can no longer participate in your life as long as she's a factor, because my expectation of who you are, although it may not be your expectation, is so much greater than the reality you're living in right now. So I feel like I would be less of a friend to just kind of let you continue to play this stupid game than to just completely remove myself and put that on the other end of the scale against what you got going on in Atlanta.
yeah.
And that was like his awakening.
Oh, good for you
know?
guys.
So now he's in Northern California. He's married. He's got kids. Like, completely different life. Back to the dude that I know and respect and love. And I mean, every year on my birthday and the Marine Corps birthday, I get a text message from him. He's like, bro, I'm watching everything that you're doing. I love you for it. Keep it up, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, like, that's the importance of that inner circle. And I think, like, as men, not a lot of us have that. Like, the do or die, like, you know what, man? I'm not, you might let yourself tell that story. I'm not going to listen to that shit. And like,
Absolutely, yeah.
hold them accountable for their successes and failures. Like, all right, bro, you get a pass, that wasn't your fault, but I want you to understand you are in complete fucking control over these other things.
Right.
And, you know, so like to
Just
your point.
You
Yeah.
are not, you're incapable sometimes of seeing your own blind spots. So you
Right.
need that tribe around you to be able to tell you that thing. Many times, women, just the way that our energy works,
Okay.
it's not always like that. It's not the hard hand of the father that's like,
Okay.
what are you doing? You know, it's not your fault.
Right.
You went through a lot of this stuff in the past. We can get through this together. Usually it's a lot softer and more understanding and empathetic, which is an amazing space for that. But
Yeah.
sometimes people just need to be like cosmically slapped across the face. Be like, I can't be friends with you anymore unless this, because like you're breaking my heart.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, like we had said earlier, sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is just say like, wake the fuck up, right?
Right. Yeah.
Wake up, man. And same goes for self-love. Self-love is something that I find that a lot of men do not do.
Yeah.
Going to the gym is one thing. I know a lot of men do that, and that's good, right?
Yeah. That's
but
like taking care of yourself.
Right.
That's not the same as like self-love, though.
yeah, like self-love, people think bubble baths and stuff. Like, it's really getting the people in your life that you want in your life. That's like a huge
Yeah.
part of it. Self-love is not pretty sometimes.
Sure.
It's cleaning up house. It's getting your room clean, you know, and sometimes you find a lot of crap in there that you're like being a little hoarderish about.
Yeah.
That you can't let go. Yeah, I think self-love for men, especially in the process, we have our Slack channel going with all the guys, and this includes like all the guys, not just the guys who finished, but like every single one of them,
Right.
from the guy who quit on day one to the guy who made it. And their vulnerability makes them so strong. Like
Yes.
as a woman looking inward to this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like so turned on by this. Like all these guys are just like really feeling into each other's feelings and congratulating each other, and then telling each other when things are like not okay and they don't agree that they don't agree, and like this is actually what I'm seeing, you know. And
Right.
that honesty and vulnerability is something that I feel women know how to do better. Would you say?
Yeah.
Like our girl Camille that I met at your gym today.
Yeah.
I want to be her best friend. I wanted to brush her hair. I want to know everything about her.
Yeah.
And then like I just don't feel like you guys are like that, you know? So sometimes you have to be put through like actual physical pain
Yeah.
in order to like have that bond, which I
Let
think
that
you guys
guard
had
down.
talked about. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think that's another thing that like brings on this sort of depressive, and I don't want to classify it as like successful men are depressed.
Right.
The last thing I want to
I
do is
get that.
prescribe people. But
Sure.
like it's a state of depression, right? A state of like, why am I even here?
Yeah.
What's my purpose? Well, focus on being the highest vibrational version of yourself, and like what is your life's work? How does that align with what you believe in, right?
Yeah.
And do you have a crew of people that are going to support you? And if not, let's figure out a way to get those guys around you. You
Yeah.
know? And that's not going to be easy either.
No, it's not. And I mean, you have to be extremely selective with that inner circle. It's not a tasking or an endeavor to be taken lightly. And I think a lot of people fuck around with that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you're like it's good enough. You know.
God, I can't even handle good enough.
So
It
like,
needs to be amazing.
So like I was retooling some of the copy on a website today, and Nicole walks in. And I'm like, hey, can I read something to you? And I read the deal, and I look at her. I'm like, what'd you think? She's like, oh, it's good. And like to me, that's the worst fucking thing you can say, right? And I was like, well, what do you mean it's good? Like, tell me why it's good, you know? And then she dove in, so I was like, okay, cool, you were paying attention. But you know, like, there's a certain level of awareness where you stop expecting hand holding and you expect the truth. Like, I'm okay with being told that it sucks, right? As I work with my apprentices and my mentees, I find it extremely valuable as a mentor and a leader to put myself in a position where there is potential for failure, right? Like, you need to witness me as I expect you to stretch yourself, become the highest vibrational version of yourself. And that takes stretching, that takes adversity, that takes friction to make that happen, you know? So it's not about whether I fail or succeed. You just need to know that I'm living life by the same standard I expect you to live as your mentor, right?
Yeah.
And I think, like, as men, the ego is so fucking heavy about only the bright and shiny. Like, Illy over here, she watches me work through shit all the time. I'm like, hey, I need you to listen to this, and this is what I've been tasked with by my coach, right? And I feel really fucked up about it, but this is what stretching looks like for me. Right? What stretches me isn't the same thing that stretches her, right? But she needs to see that I'm also being stretched, right? And I don't think there's a lot of that happening in society now.
Yes. Everything that you're reading right now is about moving forward. Just do the hard thing. Just keep marching. Deep, deep, deep,
Hustle,
right?
hustle,
Just keep
hustle,
swimming.
hustle. Yeah.
And it's like,
Just keep swimming. Yes. Dory reference. Oh, how do you know my kid is 3? Fuck.
hello, Dory. It's like moving backwards in our society today. You know. Anyway, it's seen as bad, right? Like, but it's not. When you think about any progression forward, it needs to have some kind of backwards traction, like when you fire a gun or like you shoot an arrow, right? There needs to be backwards movement and tension and friction and like hard stuff before you can let it fly.
Sure.
And it goes, right?
Yeah.
If you just that thing is just not going to go very far, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of where we're at right now with this concept of failure and like doing the hard thing, you know, and,
well, if you look
showing
at
it.
If you look at it in terms of stages of learning, right? That highest level that is unconscious competence, right? If you live there, you will cease to improve, right? But if you take a step back, intentionally into that space of conscious competence, right? Where you're now paying attention to, you're no longer living in the space where the result is the result you desire. So like it's absent of process. Like, okay, I made the lift, we're good. As opposed to going one step back in the evolutionary process where you're like, but how did I pull the bar? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yep.
Did I rack it? Were my elbows fast enough? Was my squat deep enough? How was my footwork? And you start beating the shit out of the details for a little while. And then you go back to, okay, I'm getting the result I want. But it's cleaner. Right?
How do you work that into your professional process?
Holy shit. I always have a coach, right? So as recently as 2 years ago, I was working with a guy named Brandon Pride, who was helping me find the value in the numbers of my business, cleaned up my books and all that shit, right? This is how you run your books. This is how you run your business by the books. Cool. After that, I started working with Ken Kilday, new tough leader. He's also speaking at the New Year Network in organizational development. He helped me. He did a 360 review of my entire organization, interviewed me in terms of my goals and my vision for the company. But then he interviewed every single one of my staff as a means to find out, A, are they the right people to have in the organization? Are they in the right role? And do they understand what the fuck you want as a leader?
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Oh my gosh, that's good.
Super hard, right? lot of friction created in that experience, but all for the better, right? After Ken and I finished our work, I started working with Alex on like all the bullshit that I have that nobody else can control, these limiting beliefs and whatnot that I need to overcome to move the needle, right? And through my work with Alex, I was challenged to make 20%ers a thing, right? The transitional opportunity presented itself. Jeff and I parted ways on Feed Me, Fuel Me. I was able to create realignment, blah, 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 blah. All that came with Alex, right? So like those are the guides in my hero's journey as I move from one level to the next that are always in play, helping me expose my blind spots and whatnot. Aaron, who's also speaking at the New Year Network, long time ago at the Barbell Mastermind. I mean, he gave me probably the most valuable nugget I have in my professional career, and that was trajectory over velocity. When you're 5 days old with 5-year expectations, it's like, just slow the fuck down. You know, you don't want it fast. You know, you want it sooner than later, no doubt. But if it all came to you today, would you be prepared to handle it?
Oh my gosh, the greatest amount of anxiety happens when you get exactly what you want, because then you have it and it's like, shit, what's next, right?
Yeah.
The journey really is the fun part, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, that's where all the growth happens. That's where like all the cool stories come from growth. Like I don't tell my favorite stories of my military career have absolutely nothing to do with the day-to-day of my job. They had everything to do with getting my ass kicked at officer candidate school and you know, the adversity of it all. You know, beating my chest and saying, I worked 12 hours a day for 7 days a week for 7 months straight. Like, that shit sucks. It was hot. I was sweating. I was hungry, blah, blah, blah. Those are the stories I tell.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's cool, right? It has nothing to do with, like,
the accolades,
you know,
or the medal
I got to the
ceremony
fleet, you know, and I got these medals and, like, whatever. You know, like, nobody tells stories about that shit because nobody cares.
Nobody cares. It's so funny because at the end of the day, we kind of feel like people care about it, but like we all need to be real with ourselves. Nobody really cares about it. So let's stop worrying about the degrees and the things and the this and the that.
Yeah.
Like, focus on your stories. Focus on telling your story well. Yeah. Because that's another skill set that I think that everybody is lacking now is the ability to be a good storyteller. It's an ancient skill set that was part of our survival that we've forgotten how to do. And we need to figure it out again.
Well, and that's why I love Audible and audiobooks, right? Because there's things that you can glean from being able to highlight the pages of a book, but when you listen to a story being told, to me, that's the litmus test as to whether or not it's a good story. You know, because once it's written, it's there. You know, inner circle is here. You know, to read it is one thing, but to hear it as it's being told to you, totally different experience.
It is.
Right?
I don't even know how we can explain why that experience is important for us, but I think it's something deep in our DNA. It's like we need to feel the energy of somebody telling us a story.
Well, I think that, you know, it provides context, number one, because whatever your lens is with which that you're reading, right, dictates the context with which that it's received. Whereas when you're listening to a story or watching a story unfold cinematically, right, there's so many more senses involved that it's so much more real. Yeah. Right. Like that's why, you know, 20%ers, the podcast, is in person live as opposed to via Skype or something like that, because the energy of this conversation, there's so many other senses at play that enhance the dynamic of this discussion.
Yes, like old fashions.
Thank you, Brathaus.
Brought to you by Brathaus.
Right. One, for this amazing, beautiful day on your patio, but also for these delicious old fashions.
And I wish all of your listeners could be here too. The smells of this wafting pretzel situation here is like,
we are right next to the kitchen, so
I love it.
This is very solid. We're gonna eat after this.
Yay!
So, no, I really appreciate your mission and your awareness to help men who already struggle telling their story, like get it out there and help them tell it well. Yeah. You know, it's a pain in the ass to fall into that trap of expectation, you know, where you're no longer allowed to be flawed. When I think from a logical standpoint, we can all admit that we are, right? But it's not circumstantial. And we've allowed ourselves to believe that it is. Like, oh, let me make it through the shit. And then I'll tell people how shitty it was, right? No. You know, like as you become better, whether it's one level or 10, right? As you level up, talk about that shit. Yeah. You know, like it ain't about the big win, right? Because when you achieve the big win, you're going to talk about all the little shit along the way. So why not share the journey as you're going through it? Absolutely. You know,
I wish more people would try to define their own karmic journey, like what they feel like is their purpose in life, or their not their purpose, more like the hard thing that they're here to do. For me, it's different than a lot of people, I think, which is everyone's karmic journey, right? Sure. I feel like I came into this earth gifted with determination and versatility. So I can pick something up, I can do it well, and I'm determined to do it, and I can do it very purposefully. But the shit that comes with that is that I feel like I always have to be purposeful. Yeah. So my journey in life, I know now at this point, is I need to learn to just take up creative hobbies and pursuits just for the sake of doing it, for no purpose, not to make money, to do anything, not to impress anybody, just for me, you know, like synchronized swimming or something. Or to just take a vacation and lay on the beach for a week, and that's okay, right? That journey for me is incredibly hard to do. But every time I do it, I'm like, oh, I'm living my best self, you know? I'm so glad I did that. Yeah. Absolutely. Whereas some people, their journey is they came into this earth gifted with the ability to relax and the ability to do all the things that I suck at, you know? And their journey is to become more disciplined and all this stuff. Right. So it's difficult when they have these influencers and these people that we're kind of like programmed to look up to based on how cool they are on Instagram. Right. It's hard to not be like, yeah, maybe I should be doing something more like that, you know? To focus on all of the pillars of the 20%ers, health, wealth, relationships, and time, right? To do all of that well, you can't do one thing amazing. Like you can't do one thing and be like the best person at it, because you would just not possible. Not enough time in the day. Sure. I think that it would all need to be spread out really nicely, and you would balance between this and that. Absolutely. And sometimes your time is sacrificed, but that's okay because you're focusing on this more. Or sometimes your health is a little bit funky, but it's okay because you're focusing on this more. Sure. It's a constant kind of like balance between.
100%. It is indeed a juggling act. And the purpose of the 4 pillars is not necessarily to establish balance across all 4, because I feel like that's an irrational impossibility.
It's a weird, unfulfilled place to be where everything's just kind of.
Yeah. However, as circumstances permit, the intentional imbalance is so that you can come back to, you know what I mean?
Ooh, intentional imbalance.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Doing it on purpose.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Not like, and not holding any one pillar against the other 3. I can't do it. I'm not focused on my health because I'm focused on my wealth or whatever. Well, you do that shit for long enough, well, you're not going to be healthy enough to enjoy the fucking wealth you're trying to accumulate. So eventually you have to come back to that, right? But everything has its season, right? So, from a metaphorical standpoint, 4 pillars, 4 seasons, like everything has its deal.
Oh my God, I love that. Are they associated with seasons? Really?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so what are they?
So, I mean.
Wait, let me guess. Wealth, I want to say fall. Time.
Reaping what's been sowed. Yep.
Is winter. Health is, relationship, summer, health, spring.
Ta-da! Winning.
Oh, I love it. I love seasons. Oh my gosh, can we have another show about seasons?
Okay.
Because I'm like super into seasons.
Well, now that you're in the neighborhood, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Where can my 20 percenters go support you?
So on Instagram, Jessica Depatie _ it's Depatie. I can say it, I can't spell it. And you can visit our website at thespecialforcesexperience.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Are you taking on clients in the realm of marketing right now?
Kind of depends.
Okay.
Yeah, we jive.
The right person?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. It's an energy thing. I get it. Cool. All right. Guys, get out there and support everything that Jessica has going on. Definitely check if you're looking at that next level. Entertain the Special Forces experience, and you should definitely get your seat at the New Year Network.
It's going to be awesome.
One thing that'll get you there is Inner Circle. So between now and then, focus on the things that matter: health, wealth, relationships, and time. And we'll see you next week.